Welcome to another episode of Acts of the Blood God, an independent RPG podcast. I'm your host, Kat Bailey, fresh off an airplane from Los Angeles, straight into your iPod or whatever the heck you use to listen to podcasts these days. Feeling a little loopy because I was up at 4 a.m. because I care about you just that much. I'm joined, as always, by my lovely co-host, Nadia Oxford.
There is nothing better than finding an old iPod that actually has all the music still on it, and you're looking back and it's all the shit from that era, and it's just like, oh man, I found a little capsule of love and time.
Those things are really heavy. You could like clock somebody
I had like a
over the head
green
with
one,
them.
like you throw it at someone, they're dying, and
Yeah.
the battery lasted 10 years, and I'm telling you right now, my battery for my iPhone right now, it's been like 3 years, and it's just kaput. It's absolute trash. So I am just like so disappointed in you, Apple. You had cool bricks once.
I think iPods had like 300 megs at launch, the first one, and everybody went 300 megs. Oh my god, I could put unlimited numbers of songs on here.
My first iPod was like, I swear to God, 30 megs.
Do you remember podcasts where you had to go on to iTunes?
Do you remember podcasts? What a wild thing.
You had to go on iTunes and download it and then manually add it to your iPod. Do you remember that? That's how I added Retronauts back in the day.
Oh, man. Good old manual labor of
Indeed.
A kind.
Also joining us, my equally lovely co-host and somewhat delayed Eric Van Allen.
Hi, my dad, when he was working and traveling more often, used to go to China a lot and would always come back with weird electronics that were kind of like cheap ways of him getting us, modern things that some of the other kids had. So I had the weirdest little brick of basically a burner phone with a SIM card stuck in it and an MP3 player that was like a giant thumb drive that you could plug headphones into. And it was, you literally, like, everyone else had their like iPod cords that they like plugged in and stuff, and I just like jammed this whole thing into a computer to like hit it in because it was a thumbstick basically, and I loved it. It was fantastic. We should bring back more of those like very bespoke specific electronics and less of this like all-encompassing device stuff.
I hear that Gen Z is really into like the technology of the aughts. Isn't that incredible? Because that was such a magical
They
time.
love CDs.
Yeah, they love the CDs. They love netbooks. They love like all that stupid plastic crap we made back then.
How long before Gen Alphas are melting AOL discs in the microwave just to be cool?
Hey, chat, watch this. Like and subscribe.
Wow, like and subscribe. It's just like a cat girl anime avatar. I'm melting in the microwave.
VTubers putting Mentos and Diet Coke. It's weird.
Look what my dad taught me.
Well, Eric. Well, Nadia. Happy Valentine's Day. Yes, we're I think it's tomorrow, maybe, or Wednesday. I don't know. But in any event, do you know that we've gone like 400 some episodes of Acts of Blood God, and we've never really talked about romances and RPGs? I mean, yes, we've talked about individual games and how they've handled it, Mass Effect, Baldur's Gate 3, whatnot, Persona. But romances are an interesting topic because, as Baldur's Gate 3 showed, a really good romance can cause a game to really pop off. But games like Avowed aren't going to have romances, and that's because romances and RPGs are a lot harder to do than you think. So on this very special week, I suppose, go and get some chocolates and some flowers for your significant other, your partner, and then come listen to this podcast in which we talk about RPG romances and maybe snogging with, Lae'zel or somebody. So.
Ew, you said snogging?
Yeah, snogging. It's great.
That's I haven't heard that term since my parents used to go to my grandparents went to Ireland and kept bringing back Jackie books, and it was like had like romance novels that had inside that had like passages about snogging. I'm like, what the hell is this?
Somebody kept saying people were saying snogging and smooching with the Baldur's Gate 3 patch because the most recent patch improved the kissing.
What about Mackin? Not using Mackin anymore? Is Mackin
Nobody says Mac. I haven't heard Mackin since the 2000s.
Exactly.
This just in, Mackin is in fact out. I'm sorry to say. No more Mackin. It is not 2003. So I sort of wish it were. at times.
If
You know, the
I could
2020s are
turn
so
back
bad that
time.
they've made me miss the 2000s. It's actually pretty incredible. Never thought I'd see the day. All right. Before we get started, if you enjoy the show, thank you very much for your support. Please leave us a review on the podcatcher of your choice. We are on Patreon at patreon.com/bloodgodpod, where you can get access to lots of bonus episodes. We just recently posted our Pantheon of the Blood God for Final Fantasy IX with our old pal Victor Hunter, as well as Ash Paulson. It was a very long discussion. It was like 2.5 hours. It was a lot. And honestly, Nadia, when I was done, I was like, damn, there's stuff that I didn't get to that I really wanted to talk about. This is a really deep and rich game that bears a lot of examination.
Yeah, we kind of went on and on and on, and it was a good discussion though. Like whenever you get I think that whenever we do a discussion that's like 2 hours and a half, we usually have a very good reason for doing it because you and I are too old to sit around talking too long before we start to get sore.
Nadia's a trooper. She was up until like past midnight sitting around
It was
talking about
around
Final
midnight,
Fantasy
yeah.
IX. It's
There's worse
crazy.
things to do. Staying up
Yeah, and
until
we did
midnight to
it
talk about games.
live for the Stars of Destiny,
We did.
and we had some of them kind of doing a little late night campfire, offering comments as well, having real time reactions to some of our takes, going, "No, what are you talking about, Kat?" or "Come on, Nadia," and stuff
It
like
was like
that.
a
It was pretty
sporting
great.
event, kind of.
I know. Boo!
Ooh, yay!
Yay! So go check that out. If you are not at the $10 level, you can buy older Pantheon episodes a la carte. They're available on our Patreon page at patreon.com/bloodgodpod. You can get episodes from 2021 and 2022. There's a lot of them. A lot of good ones. Skies of Arcadia, Lufia 2, and such and such. So check that out. We have lots of merch, including this like cool mug and this cool shirt at shop.bloodgodpod.com. And you can follow us on various social platforms. I think it's about time that we launched something on Blue Sky. What did you say, Eric, since they're open to the public now?
It's open now. I mean, if y'all want to run into the wild, wild west of Blue Sky, it's kind of
Wild,
nuts
Wild
over
West.
there. Let me tell you.
I know, it's great.
So, yeah, I love
Yeah, I
it.
went back to
But
Blue Sky and I'm like, oh my God, I miss you. Oh my God, it's that person who didn't realize had totally stopped tweeting and just went over to Blue Skies. So go check that
Yeah,
out.
I'm currently kind of tweeting between the two of them. So you might get something different from me than you get from Twitter. That is the Nadia promise, and don't expect it to last forever.
yeah, Blue Sky is kind of the more unhinged version of Twitter, if not evidenced by the fact that they call tweets something else over there. So like, yeah, it's a little different, but I don't know, maybe Blood God fits that vibe.
And finally, check out our sister podcast, Charlian Dropouts, the show dedicated to Final Fantasy XIV. It has its own feed. Nadia, what did you talk about this week?
You were there, Eric. What did we talk about? We talked about
The fighting game.
Of course, that's right. Okay, yeah. So what we're doing is we're doing a fighting game list, a roster, based on like which Final Fantasy XIV character would properly fill the sub-fighting niche that I actually did not know was really such a big thing in fighting games. I always thought like, okay, yeah, you have your charge characters, you have your grapplers, and you have your Ryu and Ken, whatever you're going to call them, but there's a lot going
Shotos.
on there.
Yeah.
Yeah, Shoto.
Yeah, no, we Vic basically like put together a list of all the common archetypes you find in fighting games, and we kind of talked about what characters from 14 would fit different archetypes within that. So who's your Shoto, who's your grappler, who's your rushdown, your puppet character, things like that. It's the first of probably a few episodes to figure it
Yeah.
out, but we're gonna put together I cannot remember the name that Vic came up with for it. If you want to insert it here and just be like, that's the name of it, go for it. But it was a
kind of
really
resembled
long
the
name.
Gravity Falls Fight Fighters or whatever they
Uh-huh.
called it. Yeah.
Is
Yeah,
a
yeah.
puppet character the one who sends out lots of little extra characters who are annoying, like Jill from Marvel vs. Capcom 2, sending out zombies and dogs and zombie dogs and birds?
Puppet character, I would usually think of like Zato 1 from Guilty Gear, who or maybe like Rosalina from Smash, who you kind of have this like secondary character who can also do moves, and the whole idea is to like Also, also they're sometimes called like a pet character, where you kind of have like different moves that you are using between the two bodies, and you have to like manage both of them. But you can do like really sick combos if you play it
Yeah,
Is
correctly
that
and all
I
that.
like those.
like Tron? Did Tron have a surf bot in Marvel vs. Capcom, or
I
did she
don't
just?
know. Surfbot was just a character in MVC,
Oh
a
right,
very
okay, he
funny
was a
character.
I
yeah, he
liked
was a goofy ball.
Trombone.
Trombon's
Trombon's
great.
great.
Big fan,
Yeah,
big Trombone fan here.
Good. This is the good podcast. This is where you should all be.
we support
Indeed.
Trombon, Blood
Support
God.
On
Trombon.
Axe of the Blood God, we support
Hashtag.
Trombone.
We support Mega Man Legends in this house.
All right. Let's talk about RPG romances. They're the kind of thing that can make an RPG go viral. But on Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2024, we're going to talk a little bit about why not all RPGs want to go for them, the benefits and the drawbacks. And I point you to Avowed, where my friend and friend of the podcast, Rebecca Valentine, interviewed the director of Avowed, Carrie Patel, who talked about why Avowed will not feature romance options. They said that Avowed will be featuring thoughtful relationships with companion characters. And they point out that having a dedicated romance system and a story-focused game is a ton of work. You need options for both a fulfilling romance as well as a regular friendship for those who don't want to go down that path. In addition, players generally accept multiple romance options, and expectations around the depth of such relationships only seem to be climbing higher and higher with each new Karlach and Shadowheart that video games introduce. In short, it's a big ask, also not a necessary one, if the story of the game doesn't lend itself to romance in the first place. On the flip side, the second that Avowed said that they were going to have romance, I became 25% less interested, and I was already not that interested in Avowed.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I completely see where they're coming from as well. Like, it is a lot of work, but dear God, isn't that what makes a game special? Not just the fact that you can kind of nail everyone in Baldur's Gate 3. And they're all horny, by the way. They're still horny. I know they turned them down, but I couldn't even... My character can't even take a piss without Will, like, prancing after him saying, let's be friends. But, yeah, just...
Pissing all by yourself, handsome.
But what kind of made it like really more human to me was the fact like I was getting a little chummy with, I can't remember who it was, probably Gale. That's right, that idiot. It was an accident. And Shadowheart is like, oh, I guess this is it for us. I can understand. My heart's not broken. I'm like, no, that's not it. But it wasn't the fact that I had talked to someone else. It was the fact that I really hadn't tried to have a relationship with the right kind of person. Like, when I asked her, hey, can I just sleep with the bear guy? Like, there's nothing like, romantic about it. I just really want to sleep with this guy who turns into a bear.
She's
She's
like,
like, yeah.
sleep with the bear man. Come
But she's
on.
like that. She's like, oh, yeah, I understand. You'd be stupid not to do it. So we didn't break up over that. You know what I mean? Like, I understand why that's just a hell of an ass program, but that's where we are, I suppose. And it's not necessary with every single game, of course, but people want that spark. People like sex. People really like sex, I've discovered.
Well, people like smashing for sure, but I do think that romance is not just about the smashing. This is not like Mass Effect 2 where it's like you get the trophy when you smash. Like that's I do think that BG3 is like a really good example of sort of the evolving thought process around romance and RPGs, because yes, those characters are memorable because you can romance them, but they're also very memorable as characters themselves, and the romances
Exactly.
are often deeply tied into their character arcs that are, otherwise independent. So Shadowheart's whole arc, Lae'zel's, I'm playing through Dark Urge right now, and Lae'zel's stuff plays in a really interesting way with her romance. I do think that's why I understand why the Avowed director was saying it's very difficult to do this stuff, because now you have to not only think about, we want to make compelling characters, but we want to make compelling characters that also now essentially have a second story tied into them that we have to account for, and whether the player is opted into that or not, or wants to opt into that or not, and how do we flag that stuff, because certain games, Dragon Age 2, it's going to be a very BioWare-y episode. But like Dragon Age 2 was infamous for having like tons of flags where you could opt into those romances, and so it felt like everybody was just throwing themselves at Hawk over and over and over again. It's difficult to get right because I think when you get romance wrong, it's very apparent, and it
Oh yeah.
feels like very just
Dilted.
iffy and icky. You get the ick. Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that
Well, like
Hades.
all of a sudden
sorry,
a
go ahead.
character's like, I'm in love with you. I'm like, we've barely talked. I love you and I want to marry you. Okay, chill out there. I don't even like you that much. So I
But
think there's a lot of go ahead, Nadia.
Hades kept it pretty simple though. Like it was just
Hmm.
a few that you could romance, and you could have a friendship with the Dusa. Because why wouldn't you?
Oh, I love Dusa. Dusa's
Here's a
great.
question for you. So I think we've talked about this before with Witcher 3. Witcher 3 kind of resolves its romance question very early on, as opposed to just having lots of flirting. And then once you resolve it, you're kind of dealing with a lot of the fallout, depending on whether you picked Triss or whatever. And I'm wondering, is that in some ways more interesting option to see the actual romance play out over the course of the game as opposed to flirt, 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 and then
Yeah.
at the end of the game we have sex and now we're married.
Dragon Quest V does that pretty well.
Yeah. By the way, DQ5 did a great romance, I think. Love
Yeah.
Bianca. Even though it was like, you're going to marry
Everyone-
Bianca, and I'm like, what if I like this angry lady instead who's making fun of me all the time?
A lot of people like the angry lady.
I do sympathize with the idea that like you can really only do that sort of romance story in a sequel where you have like established characters and established romances, and they had the benefit of, granted, I don't think Yen had been in the Witcher games up until Witcher 3, but Triss had obviously been a major part of Witcher 2 and was a romance option in Witcher 2. And romance in Witcher is a different bear entirely because of the way it handles that, but like the main core
bear,
romance. Yeah. Well, yeah.
Elfman.
How would I describe Geralt? Like the core romance thing of like Triss or Yennefer, right? Or both if you're dumb, and try to swing that. I think that you get the benefit of it being a sequel because now you don't have to spend these games setting up why Geralt would be attracted to one or both of these characters. You get to set that very early on, and now you just have like a forking path of like which option did Geralt go with, or like a third path if it didn't work out. Because if you try to go for both or you don't go for either, you end up with nothing. So you basically have like three paths. But you start to add on more characters, suddenly there's that many more permutations, and if you're trying to account for that in a new game, in a newly established IP where you have these new characters, and now you're trying to account for all the ways in which you could romance and then fall out of love with them, man, that's a lot just from a narrative design standpoint, looking at all the different like bifurcations that could happen and ways that it could like split out and branch and all that. It's so I get it. I mean, like writing story in games is already very difficult because you're trying to adapt it to everything that's happening in the design process, and now you're trying to move these potentially other options. But to your point, Kat, I do think it is really powerful when you get to have a relationship and it doesn't feel like the the culmination, the smashing and the ding and the Xbox trophy is not like the end of it. Like when that's at the beginning and you get to feel the relationship carry through the game, that is very memorable and it sticks with you.
Yeah, I like that very much when that happens. Doesn't happen often though.
The first time I remember being struck by romance in a game, they didn't even have sex. It was Fire Emblem Blazing Sword, in which by having my little characters stand next to each other, they would
Aw.
have little social conversations and become close and eventually like be together. And then at the end of the game, you would get a special epilogue about how these characters ended up falling in love or something and being romantic and all of that. Or they died. One of them died and it was heartbreaking. And as we know, Fire Emblem in later years really leaned into that aspect of it and discovered, oh, hey, people like this. And arguably, it was what revitalized the series, was a renewed focus on romance. They didn't even have romance in the Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon remake. I know there was no romance in the original Fire Emblem, But maybe that's one of the reasons that it wasn't that big a deal, whereas Fire Emblem Awakening was substantially more popular because
Is
you could have kids and they could come back from the future, or was it another world? I can't remember.
no, it was
It was the
one was
future.
another world. The ones you have the
Another
future.
world.
No, Awakening was the future. Wasn't
Awakening
it?
was the
'Cause-
future. I think the
yeah.
the following games, there's something about the baby dimension that I just remember
The
Tumblr
baby
losing their mind
dimension.
over the
Yeah.
dimension.
And then
Like
Three
the
Houses
Muppet
comes
Baby parallel.
along. Three Houses comes along, and it's just fan art, fan art, fan art. So
Well, is Blazing Sword? That's the first one we really got here, right?
Yeah, that
Because
was Fire Emblem 7.
that also has another. Going back to what Eric was saying, that has a really interesting relationship where you can have the conversations between like a married couple, and they kind of, let's think it's Lord Pent and Lady Louise, and they just kind of like talk about what's going on and what's happening. And God, I vividly remember this. You can only get their A conversation at the very end of the game when you're up against this big ass dragon that's about to wipe out the world, and Lady Louise says she's pregnant, and it's just like, oh shit, well I better not lose now, I guess. So I just like the build up to that. It was a really cute little relationship, and according to the lore afterwards, I think they just vanished with their weird baby,
With their weird baby.
with
their
their
weird dragon baby.
Just like Dragon Age Origins. But I do think Fire Emblem is a good thing to bring up because that's like another aspect to the romance. I feel like the romance we've talked about so far is very player centered, like your player character, your Geralt or your Inquisitor in Dragon Age Inquisition or something like that. But Fire Emblem is one where you don't just, as Harvest Lunatic like points out, pair yourself off, but you pair everyone off and you play like matchmaker. And I do think that's a pretty big driver for a lot of those games, is being able to not just play matchmaker for your own character, but doing it with your entire army, with all these different characters who could have these different relationships blossom, and you get to see them like get to know each other and be like, oh, I actually really like where this pairing is going, so I'm going to like start putting them together more often and things like that.
Yeah.
And it works really, really well with Three Houses because then when the drama hits in the second half, oh, you can get some really sad stuff going on with characters who might have been otherwise paired off, but now they're having to face each other on the battlefield, and it's wonderful, and that's some good stuff right there.
Very Metal Gear Solid.
We have to fight, but I want to kiss you. But we must fight, but I want to kiss you. Very Fire Emblem, I have to say. So, one of the things with romance in an RPG is maybe at its best, it can feel very natural and very reactive, and it adds another dimension to the actual game, and it makes you feel tighter and closer to your individual characters, and maybe it even gets you feeling like you're making a really tough choice because you really like two characters and you don't want to break their tiny little heart, make them cry. Or it can feel very mechanical and perfunctory, and numbers go up, and eventually you unlock, and now they're in love with you, and here you go. And it's not an easy trap to avoid. This gets back to the original problem with Avowed. If you can't do it well, it can make the game feel so mechanical and so stilted and totally break the illusion.
I think that it comes down to writing. Go ahead, Eric.
I was just gonna say I can bring up an example of a romance that did not sing for me recently, and it was Starfield. I tried doing some of the romance stuff.
Oh, Eric.
No,
Or
Eric,
Starfield.
come on.
I know.
Come
I
on.
know.
Like,
I actually have a counterpoint, but I want to hear your point first.
I mean, I will also broadly say that most Bethesda romances and even Bethesda adjacent, like the Fallout New Vegas romances, don't do much for me either. Like, I think those games in general have always struggled to get me on board with their romance plots because they just kind of feel very like
yeah,
everything.
I know what you mean.
They feel like everything else you do in that game, and so the way that they just kind of feel like another quest just ends up making them feel very mundane, I guess is the way I'd put it. Like it feels like work. It feels like the same thing you're doing everywhere else, and so you're just like checking off a box on the screen, and you're not really as involved as you would be in, say, like a Baldur's Gate 3, where there are a lot of like little subtle ways they inform those romances, whether that be through gaining approval for certain choices or just being able to. One of my favorite things in the Shadowheart romance is like finding a night orchid for her, and like being able
Oh,
to
that was
like.
so sweet.
It's not like a. I don't think it's necessary to romance. It might be, and I just don't know that it's not. But like being able to do that and like having that be a thing that you can do and wasn't even really signposted for me in my game. I just like
Yeah.
found the flower and was like, oh hey, I remember like Shadowheart mentioned this in a dialogue. I should pick it up and give it to her. And then she recognized that. And there are other items in the game that have similar things that you can do with your companions that will have little effects or even big effects on epilogues and romance dialogue and stuff like that, where it feels more interactive and it feels less like we've reached the appropriate level of of enjoying each other's company. Why don't we go to the romance planet now? And
A
like,
romance planet.
yeah,
Is there a
yeah.
romance planet?
I think in Starfield, like there's a place that you go to get married in Starfield, if I remember right, because you
The
get
way
hitched.
the way it works
Oh.
is you
Planet
pick your
hugs.
companion and you'll be doing quests, and then they'll go, "Hey, do you have a second to talk?" I'm like, "Not now. In the middle of a firefight. You
In
have
the middle
terrible
of beating
timing."
a monster to death with a pipe wrench. Like, not right now.
And they slowly kind of tell you their story as time goes along. Some of the stories are maybe better than others. I will say that Starfield maybe goes the furthest. I don't really like the companions that much, with like a couple of exceptions. But at the same time, they actually go deeper in writing the romance than virtually any other Bethesda game that I can think of. I liked Skyrim, but I would not call marrying my werewolf girlfriend particularly deep.
Yeah.
But in Starfield, you build up your relationship slowly, and then you get to a point where you can start dating, and then you go further, and you get to the point where you can basically propose to them. And then there is like a waiting period, and then they'll take you. There's like some kind of special hitching ceremony, as you could say. The one that I went to with the character that I picked, we went to like an abandoned planet, and it was actually like a really sort of like, oh wow, like an emotional time, I suppose. And it actually played well with the pacing of the story, because it came right at the very end before I like rolled credits and did the final mission. But it did not feel stilted. It felt like quite natural for the way that it all played out, and ultimately I really liked it. So
Bethesda romances, like every time I hear about them, they're just the most Bethesda thing ever. I recall a Reddit story where someone fell in love with they romanced Vilkas in Skyrim, and they got to go married and realized, oh shit, this is the wrong brother. I screwed up. I wanted to marry Farkas.
no, Farkas, I want Farkas.
He breaks it off with Farkas at the altar and literally hitches up with breaks off with Vilkas, hitches up with Farkas, who was like, yeah, sure, I'll marry you, I don't care. And meanwhile, they're trying to do this whole thing, and Vilkas is like saying, I never want to see you again. It's just so very Bethesda, as I said.
And then in romance options, often there's the loyalty quest, in which you go on some kind of special side quest and you get access to content that's unique to that character and can't be accessed unless you're at a certain relationship level. Maybe you get special abilities or special outfits or whatever. Anything like that mechanically shows that your characters are in a relationship. A tag team attack, that kind of thing. Maybe you can have kids. Maybe you can get a house together.
See, in my BG3 playthrough, I just made it so that Shadowheart and my character had matching togas at the camp, and that was our union moment.
I never ended up in a
outfits.
relationship. I think I mentioned that I never ended up in a relationship in BG3 because I effed up. Did not properly romance Karlach, messed up my relationship with Shadowheart, and then the next thing I knew, like,
The game was over.
I wasn't in any relationship, so I just had kind of random sex here and there.
Random
and I'm like,
sex?
oh,
Who are you
that's
having
hot.
random sex with? Like I know
Demons
Helson's handing it out
mostly?
like candy.
Demons. Oh,
You were
you win that.
Oh, you went with the demons?
Cat.
I
Why
almost
did you fucking
explicitly had sex
Xenobite?
with demons.
Are you
Yeah,
okay? Do you have specific kinks or something? Like, because I had like I can't remember the name of the demon who
it was
like
really hot. I have to
What,
well, it's
mention.
demon sex. It would be, but they were just
I'm
like the
trying
way
not to
she was.
say names because even though BG3's been out for a while, I don't want to give away like
I know.
everything
I'm
about
not.
it.
I'm. That's why I'm
And
not saying anything.
but
Yeah.
like, this is like when you boot up, like you're watching somebody else's BG3 playthrough, and they're like in Act 2, and Will doesn't have horns, and you're like,
How'd that happen?
I know what you did. Yeah. Ooh, okay. But Kat, I love that every time you play a game with romance in it, you fumble because we now have Chie and Edelgard and Karlach.
How do
Oh
you
my
script against
god,
Karlach?
this is
You're
starting to
actually
become a. Oh my gosh, this is a trend.
with
This is
Karlach. It's
officially a
just like,
trend.
hey, do you want to have a boxing match or something? Sure, and like that's romance to Karlach.
Cat Bailey boots up a new video game and sees like a strong, intimidating woman is like, I cannot fumble again.
Killing Edelgard broke my heart. It really did. I was like, I can't believe this is happening to me. Oh my god. So, um, the thing that with romances, I think that they're one of the singular things that's really attractive to people about them is I have this theory, and I don't think it's a particularly deep theory, but bear with me. I would describe it as the holodeck factor. I think there's something really alluring to people about going total immersion in a video game. And that's why they're so obsessed with graphics, so obsessed with environments, exploration, why open world games are so popular. And RPGs capture that better than most. And romance is a big part of it because it introduces a human factor where you feel like you have legitimate influence over not just the game but the world. But as we were talking about early on, it can be a trap because the amount of work required to really get that right is just becoming so exponential that we're seeing a situation where game development is not sustainable.
No,
And
but we
yeah,
still have the old model, the oldest model in the book of Harvest Moon, where you
Mm.
basically pick your mate. Uh, it's a pretty simple process, and with something like not Harvest Moon, Stardew Valley, I found it so interesting because you had very different flavors with each of the characters' backstories. Like Shane's is just like heartbreaking,
Hmm.
and Seth or Sebastian, yeah, he smokes a lot of weed. That's what I got for you.
I'm gonna take it back even further because around this time, like last year or so, I finally played Tokimeki Memorial. And you want to talk
mm,
about the classics of video game romance
Mm.
and stuff. That is, I mean, that is legitimately a game I still boot up from time to time when I just need like something to play that is chill and not like super intensive or whatever. And I'm still finding new things about different routes and different characters in that game and how you navigate through that world and their backstories and their likes and dislikes and stuff. But that was really like that was the blueprint there. You can see how that then turns into your Persona social links and into your Western RPGs start to pick up this idea of here are characters, they have likes
social
and
links.
dislikes that you have to get approval or disapproval on. Your stats might correspond to who you get paired with. So if you want to hang out with the sports girl and do the sports girl route, then you should probably go do sports. You should
Go do
probably
sports.
I I heard characters like it when you have common shared interests, so do that as a gameplay mechanic, and I feel like you see that reflected even in Baldur's Gate, where sorry to keep going back to Baldur's Gate as a reference, but it's a very good like recent reference point for romance in games, where when you do things that characters agree with, they're like, yeah, cool. And you do things they don't agree with, they're like, no,
Yeah.
boo. And yeah, cool is romance. No, boo is I'm leaving. So it's really interesting. But yeah, Kat, like you said, it's so difficult because we've talked a lot about the different branching paths and stuff, but even just the mechanics of how it works is adding another layer onto everything you do. But when it works right, it does add that extra layer onto everything you do. And now I feel it adds intentionality to the decisions you make. It adds this extra bit of, I'm doing this not just because I think it would be funny or I think it would be fun, but I'm doing this because, oh, I think Shadowheart might like it if I make this decision. And oh no, I did it wrong. Disapproval. No, Shadowheart hates me now. How do I win her back? And that kind of stuff. It does
Oh,
add
yeah.
like an extra layer.
For sure. I think that one, actually a pretty good example of how to do romance, at least for me, is the Trails of Cold Steel games. Because those take their damn time building up the characters for starts. And the social links that you do are certainly not as intensive as the ones you get in, say, Persona, but you can basically build up friendships with people, or you can romance them, certain women in the game. But it feels very secondary, but not in a rushed way, just a very like slow brew kind of way to decide who you're going to be with ultimately, and the answer is always Emma.
Uh, the weird thing about Persona that I was feeling when I was playing P3 Reload recently is seeing how honestly in Persona 3 romance was really not a big deal. It was not like a huge thing. You could chase it if you wanted to, but it wasn't something that felt like it was front and center. But compare that to P5 where I feel like there are a lot of romance options in P5 and it is very much a thing of like who'd you end up with, like Stardew
Nobody
Valley
has
or
screwed
something
it
like
up
that. Yeah.
like Cat. Uh,
I'm
ba-
cursed. Okay, I'm cursed. I'll never find love in an RPG.
we'll
Starcrossed.
guide you through it, Cat.
Thank
Base
you.
Perfect. I will
And
say that I love Rean Schwarzer. I think he's a great protagonist. But anyway,
and Base Prefect in the chat brings up another good point, which is like the
I called you Perfect.
heteronormativity.
I'm sorry.
Is it perfect?
Oh yeah.
Base
No,
Prefect.
it's Prefect. No, I've got a bit of the dyslexia.
But there is a lot of like heteronormativity, a lot of like, especially Persona, great example of at one point they had a femc and you could romance boys as the femc, but even then it was always like girl can romance boys and boy can romance girls and that's it. And also most of our games that have romance are boy. And so you
To
only
say
romance girl.
if Persona 6 doesn't have gay relationships, it's gonna look so outdated.
I think it
Not
could
even gonna
sink
be
it pretty
funny.
easily. Like it's just in this day and age. Come on.
Yeah, seriously. The year is whatever year Persona 6 comes out. Let's say 2026. You gotta have gay relationships. You just do. So it's worth noting that this month's Pantheon Game Club game is Sakura Wars. Have either of you two booted up Sakura Wars yet?
Don't kill
Admittedly
me,
not.
Vic, but not yet.
I started Sakura Wars, and I've been walking around a theater, and my character, a boy, who is a little bit misogynist, is like, "What? These women? What? I got put in charge of a secret battalion full of women?
Bears
This
will
can't
attack
be
her back
right."
to the menstruation.
And
Girls
I'm
can't drive
in a
mechs.
theater full of girls. Oh man, I thought I was going to a really cool big battalion with dudes and everything.
With
Now
big
I'm with all
beefy
these
dudes.
girls who are like all in love with me.
I'm very straight.
It's
That's almost the like bonkers part of all of it. Is it? I know of Sakura Wars a little bit, and it takes that Tenchi Muyo idea of like not
Yeah.
only is the protagonist completely unaware of the like incredible situation he has landed himself in, but he's almost opposed to it. He's like,
Yeah.
oh, they're all into me. Weird.
it's all very silly. I'll reserve my judgment for the actual podcast, but the comedic levels are very high, and I'm like, okay. One thing that stresses me the heck out is that the dialogue options are timed in such a way that
No, don't do that to me.
yeah, so you have to
I love
read
that.
really quickly, and I've already identified one of the girls that I like, which is the titular Sakura, the eponymous Sakura, and
Sakura.
I I I made her mad because I wasn't reading fast enough, and I accidentally said something that made her like run away and lock herself in her room. I'm like, damn it! So
I love it
we're
when
off
they
to a
put
bad
like
start.
the choices like "I love you, marry me," and "No, you stink, get out of here," like right beside each other, and
No,
they flip real quickly when you
that's
press
that's
that.
what I accidentally picked. Guys, I'm off to a bad start in this game. I think I'm gonna make her cry alongside Chie. It's gonna be bad.
They're gonna have confession. They're gonna have discussions about you. They're gonna have like bitch
I
sessions about
know.
you while like knitting. One of those clubs where people just knit and talk shit about someone.
Oh
That's gonna be you,
no.
Kat.
Oh my god. It's
Bitch
happening.
and Stitch, I think they're called.
Terrible. Before we wrap up this conversation, I want to point out that I think it's notable that we've barely brought up BioWare outside of the context of Dragon Age, and BioWare did not invent romances in RPGs, but for a very long time, they were very notable for them, going back to at least Baldur's Gate 2. I would say that certainly in the 2000s, they were the sort of one of the more defining studios behind RPG romances. Mass Effect 1 was a little bit cringe, but the way that it carried through the individual games, ultimately pretty handled pretty well, I think. Dragon Age Inquisition, I think, is sort of underrated for actually how good the romances were in that
Oh yeah.
game.
Hmm.
Yeah, they were really good.
Yeah, and the thing I love about Inquisition's romances specifically is that they feel very we haven't talked much about the idea of player sexual, like every character is just attracted to the
Right.
player, but Dragon Age Inquisition has some great examples of very like designed intentional choices in terms of who different companions will romance, can be romanced. You can try to romance them, but you might get rebuffed because they're just not into you. Like that happened with me because I tried to romance Sarah in my first playthrough of Inquisition, and she was just like, "Bro, not into that." And I was like,
Bro.
"Okay,"
Bro.
and I ended up romancing Cassandra instead, and that was really cool because I remember sitting there and being like, that is the first time I remember this happening in a video game, and that's like an interesting thing to have the player kind of cope with, is like, they're just not that into you, man. Like usually the game is like, no, you romance who you want to romance and we'll make it work. And
Yeah.
instead having that was like really really cool. And I obviously, like, the big thing with Inquisition is the potential romance you can have with Solus and how that carries forward throughout that game and especially into the DLC. But I do think they did a very good job of weaving a lot of those romances into stories and making them very powerful and very potent aspects of their character explorations.
Mm. Yeah, it's just a shame. It's not that BioWare has lost its way. It's that BioWare hasn't really released a new and notable RPG in literally 10 years at
Ouch.
this point. Sorry, Anthem, you don't count.
Oh
So
no. Poor Anthem. I
it's a
forgot
tough
about
one. It's
Anthem.
a tough one for BioWare,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But they were definitely a pioneer in the console RPG space, I would say. And then there's Cyberpunk 2077, which, for whatever you think of it, it did. Some of its romances were quite memorable.
Yeah, I think some of the sex scenes were a little regrettable
Hmm.
in hindsight, but I think the actual romances are some of the highlights of that game, especially Judy's a fantastic romance. I like Pan Am a lot personally, and then Carrie is a really really good one. The end of Carrie's romance is very Carrie, for lack of a better term. Like
Oh no.
it fits. Like he is an aging rock star who is trying to get back with it, and his like last mission that you can do is very very that, and I like it a lot.
People throw blood on him?
No, he like burns a boat down. It rules.
Damn.
Not to say too much, but yeah, he burns a boat down.
Oh, that's
I bet
pretty
he
heavy
deserved
metal.
it.
So I guess my final question is, what can a well executed romance mean for an RPG? And also, like, can you just shout out a favorite example for yourself personally that it was turned out to be really memorable for you? Start with you, Nadia.
Oh shoot. I was actually going to talk about Final Fantasy VI a little bit because I was saying on Twitter the other day about how one thing I realized after playing the game for the hojillionth time is that the relationship between Locke and Celeste starts off very damaged. Like, it's not something they did to each other. It's something that their pasts are keeping them back. Like, they can't be together because the way I wrote it down, it was kind of crass. I'm sorry, but like I said, Celeste just has to be real sure that Locke isn't going to slip up and call her Rachel in bed. And it takes a while for that to happen. And I like the fact that they have to work on themselves before they can even consider being together. And they're very hesitant even when they are kind of making moves to each other. As I said, it's a very kind of adult sort of thing that you want to see in your relationships. Like, people are screwed up. They're screwed up from past relationships and they got to move on before they can even consider going forward.
I think that the thing that I guess I'm looking for is adult relationships with characters who don't feel like, I don't know, two-dimensional cartoons who are there to for you to be thirsty over and have sex with, that they have actual dimensions and stories that I'm getting to know them. That kind of thing. Like Baldur's Gate 3 did a great job. By the way, Thirst Trap's good. I like it. But like Baldur's Gate 3 did a great job of balancing it out for sure, where like a character like Karlach was very attractive, but also I really cared about her, and when she friend zoned me forever,
So forever.
we nevertheless had a great friendship together.
I loved
Cat's
it.
gonna cry, everyone.
She did say that she loved me. So
Aww.
so there was that.
She loves you as a friend. What more do
Yeah.
you want? That's nice.
This is actually just a counseling session. It's actually just therapy.
Yeah, so I completely lost my. I think a really good romance options in an RPG generates fan art and discussion, and people are going to be comparing notes, be like, I ended up with so and so, I ended up with so and so. You end up with screen grabs of what was his name, Jacob from Mass Effect 3, with like his shirt off, like just full, like you're like, dang, okay, that's a chest, yep, cool, things like that. So it keeps the dialogue flowing. But do you have anything you want to add, Eric?
Yeah, I want to shout out. I know we've talked a lot about romances that are like player driven for like choice driven RPGs, but Final Fantasy X and its main story romance between Titus and Yuna just really still lands for me over and over
It
and
is very
over
sweet.
again. I think it's very well done. I think it's very well paced. Obviously, that's like the benefit of having a written like canon romance in your story. But I think when done well, that can really, really work. And just that scene where they're in Macalania and they go swimming and all that, like,
Yeah,
it's still
that's what the kids call it
it's,
these days.
it's like memorable. It's like extremely memorable for a reason. I feel like we don't see a ton of games nowadays do those sorts of like written romances for the main character, because a lot of it tends to be like more about player choice and who the player wants to be with. But I do think if you have a story RPG, I mean, 16 was another example of you have a character and they have a romance. It can work pretty well. I like 10s more than 16s, but that's because I think like FF10 is probably one of the better like love stories in RPG in general. It's just very, very well done. And also, FF10 is a fantastic video game.
So what's your favorite RPG romance? Who are some of your favorite characters to romance an RPG? Let's keep up the conversation over on Discord, which you can access through our Patreon for just $1, and you'll get the episode ad-free. Okay, it's time now for a series of random encounters. Disney has acquired a $1.5 billion stake in Epic in order to create a persistent world within Fortnite involving Disney characters. Baldur's Gate 3 Patch 6 is on the way with some, I think this is why I see Snoggin. I see Mac and Snoggin, your local equivalent updates. Yeah, they really improved the kissing in it just in time for Valentine's Day.
Good, because my Dragonborn looks real weird when he kisses.
Well, maybe it's a lot better now.
Like
I
bad
just-
weird or good weird?
It's just strange weird. Bad weird. Like, oh, I'm not really. My whole sex scene was very awkward. It's like funny awkward. I agreed with the crab in that sex scene, who was just shocked and appalled at what he was watching.
One day we'll play through the 3-player co-op Baldur's Gate 3
That would
run.
be so wild.
That would be really wild. One with one of us being the Dark Urge, preferably Nadia. That would be pretty good. And then that's how we all died. The end.
No, you die by playing with Katie. She's the one who will kill you.
It's true, she will. There was that one time that she ran over Nadia in PUBG, as I recall.
She ran over all of us. She just found a gun and a car. It was over.
She just decided that we were all gonna die, and it was over.
Well, it was PUBG.
Ori developer Moon Studios has delayed early access for its upcoming action RPG, No Rest for the Wicked. RuneScape's developer Jagex has been acquired. By whom, I ask?
It was by
Eric.
some. I looked this up, and it was like some equity capital firm. It
Oh.
was not like.
Oh no, they're
notable-
doomed.
Yeah, it was weird. It
Rest
was really
in
weird.
pizza.
Private equity vultures?
Yeah, some investment firm just bought Jagex.
You know, like
so
you
much for
do.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Like you do in this day and age. Like you do.
Speaking of acquisitions, Katakawa Company has Acquire, aka the Octopath developer. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. It has a demo. It's out now. It's one slice available, another coming soon. It's a demo DLC. I'm interested for people's thoughts on that entire sequence because I certainly have thoughts. I don't really want to talk about them right now because I don't want to specifically spoil them. I've had some conversations about it. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth out on February 29th. It's going to be a lot of fun to talk about. But yeah, you can go and play the demo. Sadly, I don't believe that progress is carried over
Ouch.
from this
I
one.
hate that.
No,
I don't play a
but
demo that doesn't do that.
No, but I think you get like rewards or something in the main game. They said something about that, so you get
Yeah, it
something.
sounds about right.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you can skip
and-
what you do in the flashback. So like.
Oh, that's okay then.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, that's fine
That's
then.
a compromise I
That-
can deal with.
Yes, that's a good compromise. And it's you should go try it. See some of the changes that they've made to the actual battle system. Enjoy. Honestly, one of my favorite scenes from the original Final Fantasy. The
Yeah,
original
same.
Final Fantasy Nadia, the Nibelheim reactor flashback, and everything that happens in it are, I would argue, one of the most memorable sequences in RPG history.
I think the Nibelheim mansion is one of the most bone-chilling mansions in a video game. It just gives me the chills every time I'm there.
Bone chilling.
Bone-chilling.
Truly.
Take that,
So, yeah.
Resident Evil, in your silly house.
You can go play that on PlayStation 5 right now. And finally, Phil Spencer has said that Xbox will share its vision for the future in a new event coming this week. Amid, well, a lot of people are panicking. I see amid absolute panic in the Xbox camp.
They lost
Influencers.
Tim Dog. They
Tim Dog,
lost
no!
Tim Dog.
Come back.
They're all
Tim
freaking
Dog.
out because Starfield might be coming to PlayStation, basically.
Didn't we like just have a podcast episode where we were talking about how Xbox is the most dramatic like following in games, and then it just proves itself out at this point. I love that we made this happen.
What's funny is that they're all old. It's weird. They're older than me. But I think that, I guess speaking for myself personally, okay. In a world which I own just an Xbox, I don't think I would care if that machine's games went to other consoles. Who cares? As long as I get to play them. Like with
Pretty much.
Nintendo. Back in the day, I had a GameCube and not a PlayStation 2. I was very invested in games coming to GameCube. I wanted them on GameCube because that was the platform that I had. But if games went to PlayStation, like Resident Evil 4 is a classic example, I was like, oh, well, okay, now it's on another platform. Cool. But at least I get to play it. You know? It's wild to me. It just is. It's a wild mentality of like, no, only for myself. This
Yeah,
is justifying my
I don't
phony baloney purchase.
I have a sorry, Eric, go ahead.
No, you go.
I have a blog hint over at co-host Nadia Oxford, and I wrote a little bit about the console wars, quote unquote, and how toothless they are these days, and it like really annoys me as as an old person who was there for for Sega versus Nintendo. And Sega, God, do you remember the commercials where they made Mario Kart look like shit alongside Sonic? And they did Mario Kart. They had chutzpah. People in my day, blah blah. Now it's just like is literally just companies like patting each other on the back, like they're gonna swap wives on the stage next time
Yeah,
they
it's
have an
because
event.
fans are sending death threats to journalists and influencers
Just grow
over
up,
very basic opinions.
Yeah,
Around
and there are always allegations of like if you like a Sony game, then you're a Sony
You're a pony.
fanboy. Yeah, and
You're a
you're a
pony.
shill, and then vice
You're a
versa.
Sony pony.
But to your point, Nadia, I think, granted, we don't know anything that is happening yet. A lot of this has been circling around rumors, and especially rumors from like camps of people who are influencers, who are popular because a lot of people who are very invested in console wars follow them, and that is kind of like the cult of personality that spawns up around this stuff and is spun up around it. And so a lot of the drama and the chaos and the tension is like around that, of like the not
Absolutely.
knowing of what's coming, just that something is coming and that there's reports of something coming, and now Phil Spencer is going to give a presentation and yada yada yada.
Oh, Phil Spencer's going to be dragged to the stone table, and they're going to shave off his mane and kill him. They're just going to destroy him.
Broke his throne and cut his hair. And,
Thank
and
you
draw,
for the Narnia
draw
reference.
Hallelujah.
Appreciate you.
But I think if something does change, and even I think this bears out today, like, is it worth it to fight a console war anymore? Because honestly, is there really a console war worth fighting when a lot of the things that we do, the things that we play on, are unifying, are coming together? Like Xbox was already ahead of this on getting stuff onto PC and having PC Game Pass and Xbox Game Pass, and now PlayStation is suddenly playing catch up on that, getting companies like Nexus who can do a lot of the work to put this stuff in places where more people can play it. And part of me, this is just speculation, but part of me just wonders if a lot of companies have realized that there's a lot of money to burn in a console war that isn't going to turn into more money for them. That like trying to win a console war, especially when you're Xbox, who like, frankly, I'm just being honest, is like behind in the console war, is behind Sony. Like it has been for a while. Like, is it worth money to spend to try and get up over Sony, or is it better to just find other ways of getting cash that aren't trying to out exclusive Sony? Like,
Right.
can we just move on from this and find different things for gaming to fight over, because we're not really in that space where people are so devoted to individual machines and individual ports. Like the fact that gaming is larger means that there's more prevalence of more devices, of more things to do, and that trying to sequester people off into their individual devices and their platforms just doesn't make a lot of sense if you want to make cash. So
Microsoft has always been very pro kind of spreading itself around, for lack of a less disgusting term. Like, it never, like, even the 360 was like, okay, well, now we're kind of talking about Microsoft wanting more people to get to know what it's like to use a PC, almost. Like, just, it wasn't like a walled garden the same way Nintendo was or Sony was. And, yeah.
I talked a little bit about this on Blue Sky.
Blue Sky.
I think all of the console holders and everybody in gaming is currently flailing around trying to figure out what's next, because it's not extremely obvious what's coming. I will say that I think the console wars is an old person thing.
It really is.
There's a generation who really don't care as long as they can play the games. They just care about convenience and accessibility. Like, tribalism is a very millennial thing, actually. I say, speaking as a millennial. And I think that Xbox is placing its bets on the notion that in a few years, we'll be playing games on every platform anyway. Epic is placing its bets on the idea of a digital console with Fortnite or Roblox, God forbid. Mobile is becoming bigger and bigger. Nintendo is doubling and tripling down on IP. That's why it's spreading out to movies and amusement parks. And Sony is arguably doing the same thing, only they're going to establish IP like Marvel, The Last of Us, that kind of thing.
The Last of Us
They
land.
they dabbled in service games and they're like, maybe that's not going to work.
That'd be a great theme
Everybody's
park.
trying to figure out. Everybody's just throwing stuff at the wall, trying to figure out what works right
must
now.
be
And
this tall
Xbox
to
is
ride
just
the
the biggest
ride, Ellie.
example of that, huh?
I'm sorry, Nadia and I are over here giggling about a Last of Us theme park while you're talking. You're making very good points about the future of the games industry, and Nadia and I are giggling about a Last of Us theme park.
What do you say? You must be this high to what?
You must be this tall to ride the ride, Ellie.
Ride the giraffe, Ellie. No, don't put me all the way up there.
To your point though, like one thing I felt when a lot of this was going around and that I wrote about in my write-up of it was that you look at what Epic was fighting Apple and Google over, which was just that platforms can control a lot of this stuff and who gets a cut on that platform, and how storefronts exist on platforms is a big thing moving forward. Because like the thing I posited was, okay, so if Microsoft games go to Sony, then Sony's now getting a platform cut of that stuff. So do the potential sales of Starfield on a PlayStation 5 then offset Microsoft ceding that amount of money to a competitor, or do they just not care anymore and they say like that money is worth like giving up the platform cut? Or do we see more things like Epic versus Apple pop up where they start having as these devices become more prevalent and more like adopted widely the way that a computer is, do we see more companies argue that you should be able to install the independent storefront, the Xbox Game Pass, onto whatever your platform of choice is, the way that Epic was arguing that you should be able to install its storefront and bypass the Apple cut through the App Store. So I think that is like going to become very important.
Not only do I think that's coming, I think it's going to be happening relatively soon because Epic just won a court case, actually, I believe against Google, basically saying, hey, like these giant cuts that you're taking and the way that you're favoring certain competitors, that's like anti-competitive. And the courts agreed with them. And there is a big push to basically make it so that you can release your own storefronts within places like the App Store and Google Play and whatnot. That's a big one. But
that could shake
in
things
any
up
event,
a lot.
nature of gaming's changing. I mean, we've talked about this has just been a running theme through 2024. One of the unfortunate reason is also resulted in layoffs. I mean, there's ghoulish reasons for these layoffs happening, but also like the fact that publishers don't know what to do. Game developers don't know what to do. And a lot of people are getting hurt as a result. But on to slightly happier news, I suppose. We got some new sales data. Persona 3 Reload is the fastest selling Atlas title ever with 1 million in its opening week. Really shows the clout of the Persona series. And then Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth was also the fastest selling Yakuza / Like a Dragon title ever with 1 million in its opening week. Whomst said turn-based RPGs were dead? Not me. I was playing Honkai Star Rail in 2023.
Yeah, it's like a really exciting way to start this year off if you're a listener of this podcast, because Sega Atlas has a giant leap off at the start of the year, which is great. It really sets up that Unicorn Overlord, baby.
But, let's do it.
Also, both of those series setting records for like fastest selling and hitting 1 mil in a week and stuff like that shows that there is so much passion for a turn-based RPG in the year 2024, and like we can't attribute this to any real one thing, but I do think RPGs and single player games are a little more in vogue than they used to be. That's putting it lightly, but it's really exciting, and the fact that it's a remake of a fairly old and somewhat comparatively niche game compared to your Final Fantasies and stuff like that. Like P3 was not setting the world on fire the way that P5 was. We have a whole episode about that if you want to listen to that in our back catalog. But and Like a Dragon, Yakuza finally really like making a mark globally is like really exciting. And so yeah, like strong year ahead, I think, for the RPGs in general. We're in a good spot.
Yeah.
Persona 3 Reload. I want to talk about romance. That's another game in which I sort of became aware of, smooching in RPGs is compelling, and these little social link stories is very enjoyable. And why is Persona such a big deal? It's the kissing. It's the romance. Come on.
Always the kissing.
You know it.
There's an NPC in Reload who's like, I just want Mitsuru to run me over with her motorcycle. And I was like, damn, so true. You're so valid for that.
Damn. And hey, it looks like we can expect a Nintendo Direct this week, potentially. Everybody's
That's
been
what we said last week.
high alert.
It's February. They always have one in February.
Yeah. We're all in high alert. Nintendo Direct watch is on.
Eric hasn't pooped yet.
I still haven't.
I think there's a pretty good chance that we're going to be getting a Nintendo Direct this week. Stay tuned.
What do you think about the rumors that we're going to get the Switch 2 announcement in March?
Sounds about right.
Yeah. I mean,
lousy March weather.
We've been doing the Switch 2 song and dance for ages. I remember writing the Switch Pro rumor roundups when I was still at USG. And it's, yeah, everyone wants to know if it's there or not, and everybody wants a new fancy new Switch. I want to buy a new Switch. I'm excited about
I want to buy a new Switch.
I'll buy a new Switch.
I love my Switch. My Switch is wonderful. It's sitting next to me right now. Who doesn't love a Switch?
Hey, Eric, I'm your Switch. Thanks for touching me.
I don't like that.
I think that probably we'll be getting a Nintendo Direct that's sort of an end of life Nintendo Direct. Maybe not that exciting, and then we'll get Switch 2 announcement, Switch 2 reveal in March. But we shall see. It's all rumor mongering at this point, and I hope Nintendo gets it right with the Switch 2. Okay, we're rolling up to the tavern, sitting down by the fire, talking about the things that we've been enjoying, we've been playing. Can't say that I have a lot to add this week because I've been on the road for the most part. Haven't really had a chance to play a lot of video games outside of Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. I can recommend a book if you're interested.
Ooh, I like books.
It's really cool. It's called She Who Became the Sun.
Ooh.
And it's set in ancient China. And it's about a girl who takes on her brother's identity and joins a monastery to survive. And the first part is a little bit like Hogwarts, but in an ancient Chinese monastery, medieval Chinese monastery. And the second part is like Fire Emblem if it were set in ancient China was a book. And there's a lot of gender feels happening in this one. There's a lot of queerness happening in this one. A lot of politicking happening in this one. It's richly written and very readable and very enjoyable. And there's a little bit of a magic aspect to it too. In this book, the religious beliefs and the things that people believe in, they are not only like extremely real, like they have very practical impacts on things. Like the mandate of heaven is literally a glowing orb of fire that people can carry around, and people go, that's the mandate of heaven right there.
You see that? That's the mandate of heaven.
That's the Fire Emblem right there. So go check it out. It's, I believe, a duology. And it was written by a person with they, them pronouns. I'm not sure if they would classify themselves as genderqueer, who was a former diplomat and apparently fell in love with Southeast Asian dramas back when they were a diplomat there. got kind of annoyed that nobody wrote those in English, so decided to write them themselves. And
Heck yeah.
this is the
Cool.
result. So go
Sometimes
check
that's
it
what you
out.
got to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think
Write the
you
smut
in
you wanna
particular,
see.
Nadia. By the way, Nadia, I think you in particular would really like this one.
Probably.
Yeah.
It's a really bad thing for a writer to say I don't have time to read, but it's the reality, and it's pretty sad. Don't be like me. Read, but I get really caught up in things too easily.
I have been reading a lot more recently. Like I have little mini book clubs and that kind of thing.
Oh, I
It's
like
good
that.
to take a break, take a breath sometimes, get away from the screen,
Yeah, I
break out a
found
book,
that.
read for just even like an hour, 30 minutes. Yeah,
That's the thing.
the
I can't
chapters are pretty
stop.
breezy.
I can't stop. I just sit there
Yeah.
and read and read and read until I'm done. And the cat's
There's
dead
nothing
because
wrong with that.
I haven't fed them. I don't know what to say.
I can't stop. I just need to keep reading. Well, I bet you can knock this one out in one sitting then, because
Good
it is
point.
really
Yeah,
compelling. Yeah,
just make a day to sit and read.
indeed. Nadia, what are you playing?
I'm playing something I can't talk about right now, but I'm also playing a lot of Final Fantasy VI, the Pixel
Mm.
remaster for the Switch, and something I'm doing it slowly, so don't expect me to keep a time clock or anything like that. But I'm just kind of making observations between the old game on the SNES and the new game, and particularly with the script, because there's this scene that got cut out of the SNES for reasons you will probably understand in a second. And it's when Gestahl is on the floating continent with Celeste and everyone and the warring triad, and Celeste and Gestahl kind of suggests to Celeste, like in the SNES version, like, you know, come rule the world with me, like whatever. In the redone translation, he suggests that Celeste and Kefka should make children together. And I'm like, oh god, everyone look at this. He's suggesting they crazy clown babies together on Twitter, just like, oh, so that's what makes
Ew.
playing.
I think, what was it that Krusty says? See this? This ain't makeup. Crazy clown babies.
Yeah. So I'm doing that and kind of like showing off some of the remix music is just absolutely gorgeous. Like the scene with the cliff, like it actually really just pulled at my heartstrings. So they redid it and just didn't really redid it, but redid the graphics in such a way that they're absolutely gorgeous. Everyone should play it. It's a pretty good port, remake, whatever.
Before we get to you, Eric, I want to cheat and throw in one more thing that I did. I finished the Scott Pilgrim Takes Off on Netflix over the
cool.
past week.
Yeah.
Did you all watch that?
Yeah.
Do you like Scott Pilgrim?
I do, but
it's fine. I like that series. I think it was an interesting way to approach that series.
I liked the comics a lot back in the day. The
Yeah, they're
movie
great.
I thought didn't age extremely well. It's very much of its time. It's very 2010. But I still largely enjoyed it. And then I really liked the Netflix anime. I thought it was did a great job of re-examining the original source material and especially deepening the evil X's and making them frankly far more interesting. They're like the star of the show. I
Yeah,
really enjoy them.
Everyone called it like rebuild of Scott Pilgrim, and yeah, yeah.
I was
Only good.
at Casa Loma not too long ago, and I saw the railings where I can't remember which one it was, but he skates down and explodes into toonies, and it's like, yeah, this is the railing. This is the railing that kills people.
There's a lot of meta commentary on the original movie, the original comics, especially the movie. The episode with Ramona and Roxy ruled. Oh my god. Like fully hooked in at that point. Enjoyable final episode as well. I thought it all hung in together really well, and I think it was a complete work, and honestly it completed Scott Pilgrim for me. I was like, okay, I'm good. I don't think I need any more Scott Pilgrim after this. This is a full story. So maybe go check out the comics and then watch
Comics
the
are great.
Netflix series. The comics are really great.
Does the Netflix series have the fight in Honest Ed's?
No, because it's not a remake.
Oh, okay, that's fair. But they should still have. No, they can't have a fight in Honest Ed's. It's gone. Never mind. Discount everything I said.
I think you see Honest Ed's briefly.
Oh,
Like
so it's
I think
still
it
there.
pops up because I think Scott Pilgrim Takes Off is still broadly set in like 2010. Like people are
Oh,
using
okay.
flip phones and stuff.
Ah,
So,
the golden age we
uh,
were just talking of.
yes, remember 2010? Amazing times. But Eric, how about you? What are you watching?
Um, yeah, so I also can't talk about stuff this week. Exciting tavern this is. So I'm also going to make a non-video game plug here. I don't know if I've talked about Dungeon Meshi, aka Delicious in Dungeon, on here yet. It's currently being adapted into an anime on Netflix, being made by Studio Trigger, and the actual series, which I'm reading the manga. I'm going to like read through the manga and then get caught up on the anime because I really got hooked on it. But the original manga is by an artist named Ryoko Kui. I hope I am pronouncing that right. And she actually is a huge RPG nerd. Did these portraits in her own style of Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 that you that are all the
Oh,
characters from
nice.
those. Hugely into stuff like that. And the actual like series is about this adventuring party is trying to go down the dungeon because long ago they heard that if you got to the bottom of the dungeon and like reclaimed it, essentially took out the mad sorcerer that was in there, you would be able to claim the riches of this long lost kingdom. And so everyone's been diving into the dungeon to try and find it. So they get to this this red dragon that ends up eating one of their party members.
Oh
But
no.
before she gets eaten, she casts a spell to teleport the rest of them out of the dungeon. And the party's like, oh no, we got to get back down there and save her because you can revive people in this world with like
Mm.
scrolls of revivify, but if they get digested, if they get like stomach acid digested, then you don't
Ew.
really have anything to revive. You
Like
need a
monkey
body
paw
to
stuff.
revive. But they don't have any cash to get down there to buy their provisions. This world is very like logical about like the actual logistics of what a dungeon crawl would entail, and that includes like you need to carry food with you because you need to eat, because it's not going to take you zero time to get down to the bottom of the dungeon. It's going to take you weeks. So they don't have any cash because they spent it all on that last trip. So they decide, what if we eat the monsters in the dungeon?
Ew.
What would happen if we cooked a slime? What if we like chopped up that carnivorous plant and used it like green onion as like a little topping? And the main character has secretly wanted to eat these monsters for ages. It's just really getting to live his life. But that is the upper level pitch of, do you want a dungeon crawl anime that is also like a food cooking show where it's like, what if you cooked a slime? How would you cook a slime? What would it turn into? How would that taste? And then I'm not going to say more, but like it goes places. And I think the attention to detail is really important because even within the dungeon, there's this sense of ecosystem. Like all these creatures exist in harmony with each other, and there's a living world in the dungeon. And
Hmm.
so the manga and the anime frequently go into like why this place exists, how it exists, how it thrives. One of the main characters who is teaching them how to cook stuff in the dungeon because he's lived in there and cooked there for a while is like really big on like preservation and not like over hunting and like eating everything. He wants to make sure that he is like keeping the balance of the dungeon. And it's such a cool approach to your classic fantasy story that then gets better and better and better as they start to introduce like, what does it mean for this island that this dungeon is here and it's like super popular and people are always going to it? How does that affect the economy? How does that affect the politics of who owns the dungeon and the land that the dungeon is on? And it gets so deep and so rich and so interesting, and it tricks you into following it down because you're like, oh, this is fun. I'm just watching them cook like a fantasy monster. I'm really enjoying this. And then it like grabs you and it's really good. And it's got like feelings potentially. I'm not sure. I'm not that far in yet. Potentially queer feelings in there. I'm starting to pick up on some subtext, and also like just fantasy battles and like dark magic and like secrets long held and politics, and it's quite good. It's very good. So I highly recommend it. I've been reading the manga series. I really enjoy the manga. The anime is also very well made. I've watched like the first 2 episodes. It's by Studio Trigger, who did Kill la Kill and Promare and a bunch of other stuff. This is another one, much like Free Ren, where we are just in a good time for fantasy. Like, I think we are in the age of high fantasy because we're getting so much good high fantasy stuff. We've got Baldur's Gate 3, we've got Dragon's Dogma 2, we've got Unicorn Overlord coming up. Even Metaphor Refantasio is like, what if SMT Persona, but in a high fantasy setting? Like, we are in a good time for that. So if you like that stuff, you are not out of things to like spend your time on. It's great.
Can you imagine being a slime or a monster in that dungeon where you've been kind of fighting people the standard way for generations upon generations? Then, like, they start whispering to each other, hey, there's this really fucked up party that's eating us. It's like, what? No, that can't be true. No, I heard it from my uncle up in the fifth floor or whatever. They're just cooking us and eating us like popcorn. You're like, oh, that's weird. They're weird.
One more shout I want to make about Delicious in Dungeon, by the way, that someone pointed out in chat. The English dub, fantastic, really great English dub. You can totally watch it in English if that is like a thing for you, and it is very, very good.
Are there consequences for eating for monsters? I'm curious.
Whom's to say? Whom's to say?
Whom's indeed. Whom's.
God, the thought of eating a slime is gross. I hate Jello. So it's
I will say that like the beginning is very carefree, I guess you would say. Like they're very much. I think the first 2 volumes or like first couple episodes are very much like, isn't it cool how we're like diving the dungeon and cooking stuff? And there is a point, I think, where that series turns and you realize once you're there that it has been building to that point and you've not really noticed it until then. But there is like a very tangible moment where that story suddenly goes like, this is not just a fun cooking show anime. Like this is not just a fun cooking manga. Like this we got stuff happening here. And that was where I went from, oh, this is a fun, light, pleasant read before bed to like, I am deep in this. I am so into this. So yeah.
Don't you cook monsters in Final Fantasy 15?
I think you do.
Do you eat monsters in 15?
It's like the most memorable part of Final Fantasy 15 is the cooking.
Yeah.
Yeah, the camping and the actually pretty amazing looking food in that game. I was like, I'm into the campfire segments. I am. So
we need to return to camping as like a function in RPGs. I've been feeling this lately. The idea of going out, I think like Dragon's Dogma 2 is like a really good, hopefully like thing that can carry this banner moving forward. But the idea of
you don't count Baldur's Gate 3.
Even Baldur's Gate 3, like camping feels like just a mechanic. I'm talking about more like I was thinking about this
literally cooking in that.
Okay, I was thinking about this because of Death Stranding. So I saw a video because people are like getting back into Death Stranding 1 because Death Stranding 2 just had a trailer, and I was remembering all the fond feelings I have about DS1 and how you would kind of sit there and you would know that you had to go out on a journey. You had to get your stuff from point A to point B, and you were looking at the topography and you were planning out like, where can I stop? And oh no, the timefall, the rain is coming. So where can I like find shelter and hunker down? And it feels very RPG in that sense that like you're setting out on a journey and you're having to like really care about where you set up camp and how you route and stuff like that. And I would love to see games tackle that more. And oddly enough, Final Fantasy 15 is a game that makes camping and traveling feel like very tangible and very like mechanically important. And Dragon's Dogma 1 is a great example of another game that does that well. So I'm hoping Dogma 2 does that as well, because there's something about like the danger of going off the road, right? That I feel like we've lost.
Stay off the road. I like the original Darkest Dungeons handling of camping, where you're in the middle of a dungeon. You can camp like once, and when you do camp, it feels like such a relief. Your little characters are sitting around the fire. You're maybe using an ability to restore some sanity. Get yourself like set to go. It's especially important if you're about to go fight a boss. There's a real tactical element too. But yeah, I would argue that the notion of a campfire in an RPG, I know I'm not breaking any new ground, but it can play a lot of roles. And I've said this multiple times, but if I think Starfield fails in one significant way, like the root of it is its lack of any kind of campfire mechanic in its Starship. Like I think that just really hurt the pacing, interactions with the characters. It was a real miss on their part. Sorry, Starfield. I love you still, but I think this is a legitimate criticism. Okay. That's it for the tavern. Nadia, take us home.
I'm gonna go ahead and make a confession that might surprise you, shock and discredit you. I never had a VCR growing up.
Really?
Yeah, I
Kids
did
now
not.
don't even have TVs, so
Yeah, but everyone had a VCR in when I was a kid, and I didn't have
like
one.
not even like your parents didn't even have one.
No, my mom didn't believe in them, which is just like.
What?
They're against God.
Wait, didn't
But
believe in them
that
or
was the
didn't
thing.
believe that they existed? Like, wait, what?
What the? Who do you think I was raised by?
I don't
No,
know.
she just didn't like the idea of kids being. Well, here's like an example of how technology kind of like scares parents. She thought like, okay, if we get a VCR, she's that means like we're going to take a Disney movie and watch it over and over and over again,
Yeah.
like most of my cousins did, to be honest.
Mm.
And we did have cable though, and back then cable was kind of interesting because sometimes theater movies would overlap with cable because sometimes theater movies stayed in theaters for a long time. But yeah, I bought myself my first VCR in 1998. I had my own TV, my own room, so what the hell? Who's going to tell me no? I'm way beyond kicking out. I'm heavy. You can't move me. And my first movies I remember buying were Mulan and the South Park movie. So there you go. I just and I never even used it that much by the time I got it. I guess because then the internet was starting to become a thing, and even though downloads were like little postage stamp things, like they were still making their way into the pop culture. So yeah, I just never got a VCR, and besides, we got a DVD player as a wedding gift because back then DVD players were like ho ho ho.
Oh yeah.
So I
You
think
didn't
I
have the
had those.
Blockbuster experience then.
Not really. I did go to. Well, first of all, Blockbuster did not show up in Canada, or at least my part of Canada, for a very long time. I went to independent places, but we went for games.
You
That
went
was
to the
my.
non-union Canadian equivalent.
I totally went to the non-union Canadian equivalents of like Jumbo Video. Shout out to their nasty ass popcorn.
Oh.
I went there to rent games, or we went there to rent games as a family sometimes. And yeah, that was nice though. I'm not a big movie watcher. I find like my husband's always bugging me to watch movies, and I'm just like, then I have to sit and kind of pay attention. I'm not great at that. Doesn't mean I hate movies. I just really got to be coerced into watching
You're
them.
just squirrely.
I'm very squirrely.
Your attention span shot. Can't sit
I
through a
don't
whole
know I
freaking
don't even know
movie.
how to classify my attention span these days. It's just
It's
was
okay. I
always
don't
like
have
this?
an attention span either. That's why I'm like sitting
I
on
don't
my
think
phone
anyone
while we're
does.
podcasting. Um,
See, I can't do that. I can't multitask. I'm very
I
bad at
got my own VCR for my room in 1996. I was hoping I would get an N64, but I got a VCR instead, and
that. It's all
I
right.
used it to record episodes of Babylon 5 mainly so that I could rewatch them over and over and over again. And I remember there was a critical episode, maybe one of the most important episodes of the entire series, like just a crucial turning point. And I had to go to a band concert that night, so I recorded it,
Uh-oh.
but I didn't want to mess it up and set it at the wrong time. So I set it to record through Star Trek Deep Space Nine as well, which was ahead of Babylon 5. And I was good. Went to the band concert, thought about the episode the entire time. So, oh my God, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Watched the episode. It cut off in the last 10 minutes.
No! What's the worst place?
And then the next morning, I was talking to my friends and they said, "Did you see that sick? Like, what happened? Oh my God." And they told me what happened. I was like, "That happened? What?"
Oh, wow.
It
That's
was like
terrible.
one of the most crucial moments in the entire series. And I effing missed it because I set my VCR wrong. Anyway, this is like the most
It's today.
1990s story I've
Yeah.
ever told. in this
There
podcast.
is that reminds me of the time for some reason our version of Charlotte's Web had a
Yeah.
printing error on it. So at the climax, literally the climax of the book, it starts over. So for years I don't know. For some reason, we had a fucked up Charlotte's Web. Charlotte's Web
Charlotte
time
up
loop.
there, like making a little message.
It's like a Black Mirror
spiral.
Charlotte's Web.
It's like
Charlotte spinning, just like
It's a loop. It's
So
all a
late.
loop.
Wilbur is back to the beginning.
Wilbur's a little
Wilbur is a
piglet again.
piglet.
This is the
like, oh my-
Charlotte's Web that leads you to
Wilbur
the
is
ritual.
about to be killed.
And I'm thinking, like, oh my god, so does he die? Like, because he doesn't win this competition, they're gonna eat him. And I never found out until I happened to see a friend's like book, and I'm like, oh shit! And I picked it up and I read the last few pages while I was there. I said, oh okay.
It's like a waking dream, a waking nightmare for Wilbur. I lived my entire life, but
Everyone
it was all
hates me
just
again.
My life flashing before my eyes as a little runt pig.
Aw,
Oh
it was
my
so
God.
cute though. Those illustrations.
Thank you, Nadia.
You're welcome.
And that's it for this episode of Axe of the Blood God. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, of course, you can go support us on Patreon. It's what makes it all possible. Patreon.com/bloodgodpod. Just $1 a month will get you access to our Discord. It'll get you the episodes ad-free. There's lots more bonus content. You can get Charlie Dropouts. Special episodes of Charlie Dropouts, I should say. You can get access to the Pantheon of the Blood God. You can get access to special live recordings. You can get access to special episodes and mini-series that we do. It's all there right on the Patreon. And of course, head over to shop.bloodgodpod.com for merch. Go follow us on various social channels. Axe of the Blood God. It's Blood God, Blood God, Blood God. It's everywhere all the time. We're heading now to the Axe of the Blood God post show to hang out with the Stars of Destiny. This week we're joined by Abby of the Moon, Amy, Anthrax Bees, Azixa, Drew, Flashback 2012, Teeps, who's one of our mobs, JB, Kara313, Mango Ults, Nuclear Sandwich, Sardin, and Spooky Man BR. Thank you so much for your generous support. In the meantime, I've been your host, Kat Bailey. Thank you for your generous support, and thank you so much for listening. We'll be back next week to talk more about the genre we love. But until then, for Nadia, Eric, myself, thanks for listening, and happy adventuring. Yeah.